I'm Patricia Griffin, 35, the family's invisible lifeline. It's a title no one ever says out loud, but it's as true as the worn grooves in the kitchen floor where I stand. Tonight, as sunlight fades behind the curtains of my parents' modest home, I'm already in motion. The air smells faintly of lemon cleaner and old wood, the scent of familiarity, the scent of duty. I set the table with an almost automatic grace, lining up the plates and silverware, careful to smooth out the creases in the tablecloth as I go. My hands, steady despite the weight inside me, carry the weight of years of unpaid debts of love, respect, and recognition. No one notices the small envelope tucked into my purse with the check I wrote last week to cover Dad's car repairs, $30,500 that no one thanked me for. The house's plumbing, the medical bills, the electric bill, all quietly paid by me. I'm used to being the family's bank, the one who steps in when money runs dry and tempers flare. Kelly, my younger sister, bursts through the kitchen doorway with that trademark smirk I've learned to dread. Her voice rings out sharp and mocking. Here comes the family ATM, always giving, never getting anything back. Laughter bubbles from the others around the table, a chorus of approval for her cruelty. My jaw tightens reflexively, but I offer the practiced smile of someone who's swallowed 100 stings before. I remember the nights I stayed late at work, crunching numbers to cover expenses that were never mine to bear. The late-night calls to arrange payments for Mom's dental work or Dad's prescriptions. The silence when I mentioned it, as if invisible. But beneath the exhaustion, a different kind of energy stirs. A secret power I've carried all along. Years of meticulous records, spreadsheets, and legal papers that catalog every penny I've poured into this family. Proof of my sacrifices, my worth, my unseen labor. Tonight, that power hums quietly at the edge of my thoughts. Maybe, just maybe, it's time to let it out. But for now, I tuck the thought away and keep setting the table, biding my moment as Kelly's laughter fades into the background. I can still hear the echo of that family dinner from years ago, the one seared into my memory like an unhealed wound. I was 16, clutching my valedictorian plaque, heart swelling with pride. The dining room smelled of roast chicken and stale disappointment. Kelly sat across the table with her mediocre report card, beaming as Mom and Dad showered her with praise for improving, even a little. When I held my achievement up, their eyes barely flicked in my direction. "That's expected of you," Dad said, voice flat and dismissive. I remember the sharp contrast. Kelly was the golden child, bathed in light no matter what she did. I was the shadow, always expected, never celebrated. That night, my birthday, I gave Kelly a handmade gift, a delicate bracelet woven from threads I'd saved from my own sweaters. Her thanks was a cold shrug, a quick thanks, no warmth, no gratitude. I swallowed the sting silently, telling myself family was complicated and love was messy. It was easier to keep my head down, to take on the weight of peacekeepers while my parents fawned over Kelly's every whim. I became the silent sacrificer, the one who absorbed the barbs, the dismissals, the unspoken hierarchy. Kelly's sharp words and their dismissive glances carved deep into my soul, but I clung to the hope that compliance might earn me some semblance of love. It never did. The years since have only solidified that pattern. I've poured nearly $75,000 into keeping this family afloat. $12,000 for Dad's medical bills, $8,000 for Mom's dental work, $15,000 patching up the family car that barely runs yet keeps them all moving. I've paid for groceries, home repairs, even property taxes, $20,000 just to save the house from foreclosure. Kelly scoffs at every dollar, calling it throwing money away. I've sacrificed my own dreams, even postponing my wedding plans to shoulder these burdens. My husband, Michael, is the quiet anchor who reminds me I deserve respect, who listens when I'm too tired to speak. What no one sees is my secret power. The careful stack of receipts, bank transfers, emails that prove everything. The evidence of my unwavering support. But at every Sunday dinner, that power is invisible, erased by Kelly's entitlement and my parents' blind favoritism. The room becomes a battleground where my contributions are invisible, and Kelly's control is absolute. Last Sunday was the worst. I had just gotten a call from my boss, a reminder about a critical meeting I couldn't miss. Excusing myself quietly, I thought I'd avoid any drama. But Kelly was waiting. The moment I stood up, she seized the room's attention, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Don't worry, Patricia can just do all the work here since she's so good at playing family manager." Laughter erupted like a wave, crashing over me. My cheeks burned, the heat of humiliation searing through my skin. I caught Michael's warning glance, but I forced a tight smile, swallowing the hurt. "It's just a joke," I told myself, but the sting lingered. I tried to speak up, voice trembling but firm. "I handle the details because I care," I said, hoping to reclaim some dignity. But the room fell cold, the silence swallowing my words like they never mattered. Kelly's smirk only deepened, and I felt the old familiar knot of doubt and pain twist inside. Why did she have the power to belittle me so easily? Why was I still letting her? The questions settled like stones in my chest, heavy and unforgiving as I returned to the table, the invisible lifeline once again quietly bearing the weight alone. The moment I dared to resist, the backlash was swift and merciless. It started with whispers, soft enough to be ignored, but growing louder each day. Kelly, ever the puppeteer, spun her web of deceit with practiced ease. She painted me as the selfish one, the attention seeker who always needs to be the center of everything. I caught her in the kitchen one afternoon, talking to Jenna, our youngest cousin, coaxing her into reporting every minor slip I made. Jenna's wide eyes flicked nervously toward me, the weight of betrayal sinking in deeper than any harsh word Kelly could have thrown herself. It was subtle, but pervasive. Suddenly, I was the family's problem, the one stirring unrest with my unrealistic demands. Linda was the worst. I overheard her, voice low but venomous, telling Dad, "You'll never love her like we love Kelly, no matter how hard she tries." The words cut through me sharper than any accusation. Even Michael's quiet attempts to defend me against their cold glares were met with icy dismissal. The gaslighting was relentless. Kelly insisted I was imagining things. David warned me to stop stirring drama, as if my exhaustion and pain were just fabrications. The bills I once covered without question went unpaid by others. The errands I managed fell by the wayside, and no hand was offered in return. The family's silence was deafening, wrapping around me like a suffocating cloak. I was trying to hold on, but the ground beneath me was crumbling fast, and the people I thought I could count on were turning their backs. I decided I couldn't keep swallowing the bitterness in silence. After our usual Sunday dinner, while the room still hummed with the aftertaste of forced smiles and unfinished conversations, I called for a family meeting. My hands trembled as I spread out my meticulously kept records, bank statements, receipts, spreadsheets, all chronicling the $75,000 I'd poured into keeping this family afloat. "I'm exhausted," I said, voice steady but raw with emotion. "I need acknowledgement. I can't keep giving without being seen." Kelly's lips curled into a smirk that twisted my gut. "You're exaggerating," she said smoothly. "Dad paid most of it. You're just trying to make yourself look better." Before I could respond, Linda broke down in tears, accusing me of attacking the family, turning the conversation into a spectacle of my supposed cruelty. David's apology was hollow, a mere nod toward peace before he sided with Kelly's narrative. Aunt Susan, meant to mediate, urged me to let it go for the family's sake, as if my pain was less important than keeping the fragile peace. I left that room crushed, my words swallowed by the walls that had witnessed so many of my silent sacrifices. Kelly's triumphant smile as I walked away was a dagger. I realized then how deeply she controlled not just the family story, but the very air I breathed when I was supposed to be safe. Weeks passed, and the holiday gathering arrived like a minefield. I had hoped to share a glimmer of joy, my recent promotion at work, but Kelly's venom was ready. As I began to speak, she cut me off with a loud, scornful laugh. "Sure, Patricia, you're just lucky because you're the family slave." The room stifled a laugh. I felt my face flush crimson with humiliation. When I tried to share the moment I'd been proud of for so long, Kelly dismissed it coldly. "We don't care," she said, and the weight of those words crushed me in front of everyone. At dinner, she unveiled her cruelest jab yet. Holding up what she called my box of memories from Dad's will, she mocked it as nothing but sentimental junk. The family chuckled, their laughter echoing through the room like nails driven into my dignity. Michael's sister Rachel watched in disbelief, her eyes asking silent questions I couldn't voice amid the humiliation. The damage was more than emotional. It was social, eroding my reputation among those I loved and respected. The family's facade cracked, revealing the sharp edges of their contempt. Desperation clawed at me as I sought one last chance for peace. I cornered Kelly in the quiet of the afternoon, away from prying eyes. "I've given everything," I said, voice trembling but resolute. "All I've ever asked is for respect and fairness." She shrugged, a cold, dismissive gesture. "You're just jealous," she sneered. I laid it all out clearly. Equal treatment, transparency about money, acknowledgement of my sacrifices. For a moment I thought she might listen, but she laughed, cruel and unrepentant. "This is the last time I'll ask," I whispered, my voice breaking. Her reply was ice, slicing through the fragile hope I clung to. "Then maybe it's time you stopped asking." That was the line, the point where hope died, and the reality settled heavy. Peace was impossible. The silence that followed Kelly's last words was suffocating. I retreated into myself, feeling the weight of every unpaid bill and each dismissive glance like stones pressing down on my chest. I tried to reach out, to explain, to clarify, but the family's walls had hardened. Invitations to Sunday dinners thinned until they stopped altogether. Phone calls that once buzzed with superficial pleasantries fell silent. Even Michael's family began to question my version of events. Caught in that tangled web Kelly wove with ease, Michael tried to shield me, offering quiet reassurances, but I could see the uncertainty flicker in his eyes when he spoke to his parents. The isolation was total. I was left to wonder if I was the problem, the one failing to keep the family together instead of the one who'd been quietly crushed under its weight. Each day felt heavier. The familiar scent of lemon cleaner in my parents' home became a reminder of the coldness I now faced. Those Sunday dinners I once endured as a silent supporter turned into battlegrounds where my worth was erased with every smirk and whispered conversation. The table, once a place of strained civility, morphed into a stage where Kelly's laughter echoed loudest, ringing sharp and cruel. Her voice carried the poison that severed the last threads of connection I thought we had. I felt invisible, not just unseen, but erased, like I was no longer a part of the family at all. The realization stung deeper than any insult. I was the family's backbone, yet I was the one left broken and alone. In the quiet hours of the night, I wrestled with the storm inside me. Self-doubt gnawed at my resolve. Had I been the problem all along? Maybe my sacrifices were invisible because they were insignificant. The thought was unbearable, but it seeped into my mind, whispering lies that threatened to consume me. I could almost hear my parents' voices dismissing me. She's always been the problem. The loneliness was overwhelming. Michael's presence was a lifeline, but even he couldn't fill the void that Kelly's manipulation had carved. I felt crushed under the weight of my own hope and despair. The family I'd tried to hold together was fracturing, and I was left shattered on the floor, wondering if I had the strength to stand again. Then, one Sunday, everything changed. I arrived at the house, heart pounding with a mix of dread and a faint glimmer of hope. The living room was crowded. Faces I hadn't seen in weeks gathered around the coffee table, hushed whispers filling the air. David stood at the center, holding an envelope thicker than any I'd expected. My hands trembled as he cleared his throat. "We're here to read Dad's will," he announced, his voice heavy with finality. Kelly's eyes gleamed with triumph even before he spoke. "The house goes to Kelly," David declared, his gaze locking with mine for the briefest moment before turning away. "Patricia," he added with a forced smile, "you'll receive this box of memories." Kelly smirked, holding the box aloft like a trophy. "Looks like you get the junk," she said, her voice dripping with contempt. The room's atmosphere shifted, a cold weight settling over me. I forced myself to open the box right there, hands shaking so badly I feared dropping its contents. Inside were faded photographs, yellowed letters, sentimental remnants of a past I'd tried to preserve for years. Then, tucked beneath the pile, I found a second envelope, thicker and heavier. My fingers trembled as I pulled out a deed, signed by Dad in 2019, granting me ownership of the house. The room fell into stunned silence. David's face drained of color. Linda gasped, clutching her chest as if struck. Kelly's smirk vanished, replaced by a flicker of fury I hadn't seen before. Everyone's eyes fixed on me, witnesses to a revelation that shattered their carefully constructed narrative. Tears welled in my eyes, not from sadness, but from a fierce, simmering resolve. The betrayal was raw and deep. For years they'd hidden this truth, choosing humiliation over honor, erasing my rightful place in the family's story. The chains of my silent endurance snapped in that moment. I was no longer the invisible one. I was the reckoning. The room felt smaller, tighter, filled with unspoken accusations and broken trust. My heart pounded not with fear, but with the cold clarity of a woman who had finally seen the truth and refused to be broken by it. Later that night, alone in the quiet of my home, I let the emotions flood in. The anger rose sharply, cutting through years of pain like a blade. I thought back to every unpaid bill I'd covered, every effort mocked or dismissed at the dinner table, the humiliation, the endless grind of invisible labor. It all surged within me. The realization crystallized. My family's love was conditional, transactional. Their affection came at the price of my silence and sacrifice, but so was my power. I had carried this family on my shoulders, cataloging every detail in spreadsheets and legal papers, waiting for a moment to claim justice. Now the anger fueled a new clarity. No more invisibility, no more quiet suffering. I whispered to the empty room, "Never again." This was no longer just about the house or money. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my control, my very self. When Michael came home, I knew I had to share what had happened. "I can't keep doing this," I said, voice low but steady. "It's time I take back what's mine, without their approval." He nodded, the quiet strength I'd always depended on shining in his eyes. "You have every right," he said. "Let's plan this carefully." Together, we began to sketch out a strategy, not one driven by vengeance, but by proportional justice. We talked about cutting off financial support, withdrawing emotional engagement, and protecting myself legally with the meticulous records I'd kept all these years. Michael suggested bringing in a family lawyer to navigate the inevitable backlash. I felt a shift within me, from wounded victim to resolute strategist. I started drafting emails, organizing documents, preparing for the fight I'd long avoided. The battle was no longer whispered behind closed doors. It was declared. I sat at my kitchen table late into the night, surrounded by stacks of bank statements, bills, and spreadsheets. My painstakingly kept records that had become both armor and sword. Every number, every receipt told a story I'd lived through quietly for years. House taxes, car insurance, groceries, medical bills. My name was the common thread. Without my steady hand and paycheck, the family's financial house of cards would crumble. I began to map it all out, column by column, tabulating just how much they depended on me. It wasn't just the obvious expenses. I found hidden lines where my money covered their insurance premiums and credit card payments. I even stumbled on something more troubling. Kelly's phone bills were tied to accounts I'd been paying for, without my knowledge. My heart sank as I realized how deeply entangled my finances were in their lives. The more I dug, the clearer the power imbalance became. They lived in denial, pretending they were self-sufficient, but the truth was laid bare in my spreadsheets. My legal advisor confirmed what I had suspected, but never dared fully embrace. The deed to the family home was mine, giving me undeniable leverage. This was no longer just about money. It was about control, about reclaiming the respect I'd been denied. What struck me hardest was Kelly's secret reliance on me for favors disguised as loans, small amounts she begged for quietly, always with that smarmy smile, never acknowledging the weight I carried. The family's delicate facade was fragile, built on my silent sacrifices. Now, the scales were tipping. For the first time, I felt a flicker of power stirring inside me. tempered by the heavy knowledge of what I might have to do. Despite the ache in my chest, I felt oddly calm. This inventory of vulnerabilities was my blueprint. It showed exactly where I held the reins, how I could pull back and watch them falter. It was bitter to see how much they depended on me, yet refused to see me. But understanding their fragility gave me a strange sense of hope. I wasn't just the scapegoat anymore. I was the linchpin. I closed my laptop slowly, the numbers glowing softly in the dim light, whispering promises of change. I wasn't ready to move yet, but I was ready to plan. This was the quiet before the storm, and I was gathering my strength. The next days were a careful dance. Behind the scenes, I became a ghost in my own family's finances. I changed passwords on shared accounts, banking, utilities, insurance, locking them tight with codes only Michael and I knew. Automatic payments I once authorized were quietly redirected, funds rerouted through new accounts under my control. I filed updated ownership documents with the county clerk, ensuring my legal claim was airtight. None of this was public. I wore my usual calm demeanor like armor, attending Sunday dinners with a quiet grace that belied the storm brewing beneath. Kelly's eyes narrowed, suspicion simmering beneath forced smiles, but I said nothing. I played the long game, letting her doubt grow while I tightened my grip on the family's financial strings. Michael was my silent partner in this. I discreetly informed his lawyer, preparing for the inevitable fallout. We discussed every detail in hushed tones late into the night. What to say, what to hold back, how to protect myself legally while keeping the appearance of normalcy. I wasn't yet ready to expose the family's fractures, but I was ready to hold the line. Each small step felt like a quiet rebellion, a reclaiming of power I'd long denied myself. Inside, I was steel, but outside, I was the picture of patience and composure. The house smelled faintly of lemon cleaner when I left for those dinners, the scent a sharp contrast to the bitter taste in my mouth. Kelly's gaze lingered a little too long, her smile a little too tight, but I met it with steady eyes. The real battle was hidden from view, but it was already underway. One night, while poring over the family's bank statements with a growing sense of dread, I stumbled upon something that nearly stopped my breath. Kelly had been hiding a staggering debt, over $150,000 spread across credit cards and secret loans none of us knew about. The numbers were impossible to ignore: overdue payments, mounting interest, and a looming threat of foreclosure on the second property Dad had once mentioned in passing. My fingers trembled as I reread the statements. The family's carefully maintained financial stability, the one I had kept afloat with every paycheck, was nothing but a fragile illusion. Kelly's constant attacks and belittling, her cruel jokes at my expense, now took on a darker meaning. She had been covering up her reckless spending, desperate to keep her golden child facade intact while dragging us all toward ruin. The revelation hit me harder than I expected. Anger and disbelief warred inside me. But beneath it all, a cold clarity took hold. This wasn't just about money anymore. Kelly's secret debt was a minefield, her Achilles heel. Withdrawing my support wouldn't just hurt, it would expose her lies and force her to face the consequences she'd long avoided. I shared the discovery with Michael, whose face grew grim as he scanned the figures. "This changes everything," he said quietly. "We need to act fast. If the family finds out, it could all come crashing down." The urgency in his voice sharpened my resolve. Suddenly, the stakes were higher than ever. This was no longer a quiet assertion of boundaries. It was a battle for survival. Kelly's world of manipulation and control was beginning to unravel, and I was the one holding the thread. That night, sleep was elusive. Thoughts spun relentlessly, the weight of the secret pressing down on me. The family laughter I had once craved now felt like a hollow echo, destined to turn into panic and chaos once the truth surfaced. I could almost hear the walls of denial and silence cracking, the carefully maintained masks slipping, but I also felt something new, a fierce determination. I wasn't just the family's forgotten provider anymore. I was the pivot on which everything could turn. The power was mine to wield, and I would wield it carefully, deliberately. The house, the money, the lies, they all converged into a single mission: to reclaim my worth and make them see me at last. The first move was quiet, but decisive. I stopped every payment without a word. No announcements, no explanations. House taxes went unpaid, car insurance bills unpaid, groceries left to be covered by others. I sent formal notices to utility companies and lenders, making it clear I would no longer authorize payments on my family's behalf. At the next Sunday dinner, the tension was palpable. Kelly erupted in complaints, her voice loud and sharp, blaming the mounting bills on everyone but herself. But I stayed silent, watching her face contort with confusion and frustration. The first cracks appeared almost immediately. A phone line went dead mid-conversation. A credit card was declined at the grocery store. The family's delicate balance began to tilt. Others noticed too. Whispers spread in corners. Eyes darted around uncertainly. Kelly's frantic attempts to rally sympathy and support faltered as the truth of my withdrawal became undeniable. Yet, no one dared confront me directly. I maintained a calm, composed exterior, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing me rattled. Kelly's fury simmered beneath her forced smiles, but she couldn't quite connect the dots. The subtle shift unsettled her, but she masked it with bravado, trying to hold on to the control slipping through her fingers. Meanwhile, the family's fragile facade showed cracks, quiet conversations behind closed doors, uneasy glances exchanged. The power had shifted, and I held the reins firmly now, watching as the consequences began to unfold. The living room buzzed with the usual Sunday crowd, extended family, neighbors, even a few casual acquaintances drawn by the undercurrent of family drama that had become almost legendary. The clink of glasses and the murmur of small talk filled the space, but beneath it all, I felt the simmering tension like a live wire. I stood quietly by the window, clutching a folder thick with every piece of evidence I'd painstakingly gathered over months: deeds, bank statements, bills, and the damning records of Kelly's secret debt. The scent of lemon chicken and freshly baked bread mingled with the faint trace of my mother's floral perfume, a sensory reminder of years spent trying to please this family that had never truly seen me. When the moment came, I stepped into the center of the room. The chatter died instantly, all eyes turning towards me. Kelly's smile faltered, her eyes narrowing with suspicion. My parents sat rigid, faces flushed with surprise and something like dread. I took a deep breath, steadying my voice. "For years I carried this family," I began, holding up the deed to the house, its official seal catching the overhead light. "This," I said, "is my ownership, the truth Dad never wanted you to see." A hush fell as I laid out the financial records, each page a silent testament to the unpaid bills, the groceries, the insurance premiums I had covered without thanks. Then came the secret: Kelly's $150,000 debt, hidden in plain sight, a weight dragging down the family's fragile stability. Kelly's face drained of color, her lips parting but no sound coming out. David's usual stern composure cracked. He stammered as if searching for words that wouldn't come. Linda's eyes glistened, but the tears that usually masked her dismissiveness were absent. There was no escape this time. "You hid the truth," I said, voice firm but not cruel. "Humiliated me, stole what was mine." I felt every eye lock onto mine, the air thick with disbelief and quiet judgment. "Today, I'm setting new boundaries. I will no longer support or enable this family's dysfunction." The room held its breath. Some faces softened. Neighbors nodded, whispers of approval rippling through the crowd. This was my moment. The champagne moment. The moment I claimed my power and shattered the golden child's throne. Kelly's world began to unravel almost immediately. The phone calls came in waves. Creditors, lenders, collection agencies, all demanding payment for debts long ignored. The foreclosure notice on the second property arrived just days later, a stark reminder of the financial ruin lurking beneath the surface. Family members who had once nodded along with Kelly's version of events now exchanged uneasy glances, questioning loyalties and stories they'd accepted without doubt. Kelly, desperate and unmoored, reached out to me with frantic apologies and hollow promises. "I'll change," she begged in texts and broken phone calls, her voice cracking with desperation. But I remained firm, a wall she could no longer breach. David and Linda, once unyielding pillars of favoritism, now showed cracks in their facade. David's stern silence replaced his usual dismissiveness, and Linda's protective instincts faltered under the weight of truth. Some of Kelly's closest allies within the family began to waver, torn between long-held loyalties and the undeniable evidence I had laid bare. The cold withdrawal of my support was a shockwave that rippled through our family's foundation. Kelly's carefully constructed world of control and manipulation was crumbling, and her isolation deepened with every passing day. The safety nets she once took for granted were gone, and for the first time, she faced the consequences alone. In the chaos that followed, Kelly's desperation turned into relentless manipulation. Messages flooded my phone, some dripping with guilt, others veiled threats thinly disguised as concern. She enlisted relatives to intervene, sending them as messengers in a futile attempt to break through my resolve. The barrage of calls and texts was overwhelming, each one designed to unnerve me, to make me question my stance. She even threatened to expose my personal vulnerabilities, hoping to shatter the armor I had so carefully forged over years of neglect. Love bombing alternated with icy threats. "Think of the family," she'd plead, then hiss, "You'll regret this." But I was ready. I blocked numbers, deleted messages, and refused to engage. The emotional storms that once left me trembling now rolled off my back like rain. Years of silent suffering had tempered me into steel. I saw through her tactics, the attempts to gaslight, to guilt, to intimidate, and met them with unwavering calm. Each failed attempt only magnified her isolation, peeling away the last remnants of the control she'd wielded so effortlessly. The family, too, began to see her for what she was, a desperate figure clinging to a fading illusion. My boundaries were no longer lines in the sand. They were walls, and Kelly's grip on us all was slipping fast. With Kelly's influence diminished, I began to breathe again. The heavy weight of invisible labor lifted, replaced by a quiet peace I hadn't known I could feel. Sunday dinners, once battlegrounds, became less frequent, replaced by intentional, thoughtful gatherings with Michael and those few who truly supported me. I invested in my marriage and my own growth, no longer the family's invisible ATM, but a woman newly recognized for her worth. Legally, I solidified my ownership of the house, transforming it from a symbol of pain into a sanctuary of peace. The scent of fresh paint and blooming lilies now greeted me at the door, replacing years of stale resentment. My parents, confronted with their bias, began tentative steps toward fairness, though I remained cautious. Forgiveness was not yet on the table. Respect was the first victory. Kelly's fate was uncertain. Financial strain and social isolation shadowed her days. Yet I felt no triumph in her fall, only a quiet sadness for the sister I once loved but could no longer save. I reflected on my journey from invisibility to empowerment, grateful for Michael's steadfast support and the strength I found within myself. The box of memories Dad left me was never just sentimental. It was a symbol of reclamation. This story, once defined by silence and sacrifice, closed with liberation and the promise of a new beginning. I was free, and for the first time, I was truly seen.